Nobody is coming to authorize your becoming. Not your pastor, not your spouse, not your friends or your community. You keep saying you're waiting on God, but what if God is patiently waiting on you? Today, we're talking about the moment that actually changes everything. The moment that you realize that the permission that you've been waiting on has been in your own hands this entire time. And then you make a decision to take it. Hey sis, welcome to the Bold Becomers podcast. I'm your host, Chara, and this is the space for extraordinary women of faith who love God deeply, but know that there's more alignment, more freedom, and more shine waiting for them. If you're tired of shrinking, self-silencing, or feeling like authenticity and faith are somehow at odds, you're in the right place. Here we unpack godly authenticity, bold becoming, and the shine method so you can realign your value, your voice, and your virtue and live your faith with clarity and courage. So, if you're ready to stop hiding, start aligning, and live like you were made to shine, you're in good company. Grab your journal. Let's talk. Let's get into today's bold declaration. All this time, I thought I was waiting on God. I prayed on it, asking for things to change, expecting a miraculous shift. What I didn't know, the shift that needed to happen was in me. God has placed desires, dreams, and messages of destiny within me. And instead of going toward them, I was waiting to be sent. I was looking for a sign. I had been hoping for the right timing. But now I understand the shift I needed was permission to pursue without relenting. Today, I boldly declare I'm signing my own permission slip. I hope that you take this bold declaration with you as we carry on throughout the rest of today's episode and beyond. Can I share with you a personal truth that I just realized? Authenticity begins with agency. That is a truth that just hit me really hard last week. I had been mentally wrestling with some things that were truly frustrating for me. And while there were contributing factors outside of me, I have been clear about taking ownership of the things that I can control because I believe that is an intricate part of doing this bold becoming work. Is it may not be my fault, but it is my responsibility. Remember we talked about that before. So when I am assessing the things in my life that I don't like, the things in my life that are frustrating, that are draining for me, that are seemingly bringing me down and taking my focus away from what I know God is calling me to, I have to do an assessment. I have to take notice of what is transpiring. And as I begin to do that, I was sitting in prayer and I heard God say, well, when are you going to choose something different? And that's when I realized something for myself. See, up until that point, I was very clear about what I did not like. I was vocal about what was frustrating me, what was getting on my nerves, how it was making me feel. Right? I noticed the feeling in my body. I noticed the restlessness in my sleep. And I had even gotten to the place where I was allowing myself the space to emotionally process it, right? Like I was crying about it, I was, letting myself have those quiet moments in my closet in my prayer time where I would just let myself cry and be honest about how I was feeling about the situation. But not once had I stopped to say, I'm not doing this anymore. And this is the point that we all have to get to. It's not about conditions lining up and becoming just right. It's not even about other people in our lives being willing to support our decision. We just have to decide. And let me tell you something. The moment that I decided that I wasn't going to tolerate that anymore, that was the moment that I started to notice a shift and a change around me. And throughout my walk with God, I feel like I've always known that the waiting, the process, the time between receiving what God has shown you, what God has said to you, most of the time, that time is not so much about waiting as it is about process. And God kind of stepping back and allowing you to not only deal with the consequences of not making a decision or not moving in alignment with what He's shown you, but it's also the process of you actually taking the time to learn how to use the agency that God has already given you to get different results. And so, with that being said, I want to invite you deeper into this today because it's time for all of us to learn how to take a hold of our agency and to start using it to sign our own permission. Usually, the conditions that lead us up to the point of permission are that we are able to clearly articulate what is wrong. We know fully what frustrates us. You've probably even prayed about it repeatedly for a while. And maybe those prayers even transitioned into crying. But somewhere along the way, awareness became a substitution for you making a decision. You mistake naming the problem for closing the door on the problem. You've been waiting for the timing to be just right. Sometimes you're even waiting for someone else to go first, for a feeling of readiness that never seems to come, for permission that you're assuming someone else has to give you. And you've convinced yourself that the waiting is spiritual. It feels like patience. It feels like trust. It may even feel like endurance, but sometimes it's just delay dressed up in spiritual language. But here's what I discovered, that authenticity begins with agency. You cannot become who God created you to be while you're waiting for someone else to authorize your becoming. And this is what will happen. God will send you a message. He will literally send you what you need to do, what adjustments you need to make, what things you need to say no to. You'll first probably feel it in your body. It'll be like a prick in your heart, a little pinch in your stomach. Then it starts to turn into the headaches, the restlessness, the sleepless night. And then you start to realize, I don't really have peace around this situation. And you think that it's the contributing factors in the situation that's adding to the restlessness, that's causing the lack of peace. When in reality, it's your hesitation to make a decision concerning this situation that has had you stuck in repeating cycles over and over again. You can see how God is moving through the bushel, the recognition, the conviction, and then all of it is working together to get you to move in alignment with what God has already told you. But you're sitting there thinking that you need another confirmation, another stamp of approval, another cosigner that's telling you that this is something that you need to do, or yes, that's the right decision, or go ahead, girl, you got it. And the truth is that the yes that is required in order for you to move forward, to move in alignment, to start receiving and seeing the results that you're expecting, all hinge on your yes. The yes is yours to give and no one else. What I need you to understand is that permission was never something that was meant to be handed to you. It's something that you get to sign for yourself. You've been treating the message and the invitation that God has been sending you as if it needs everyone else's sign off on it for it to be valid, for it to be right, for it to be something that you should act on. But it does not. It only requires an affirmative response from you. And maybe you're sitting in between making the decision and actually deciding. But what I want you to know is that the moment that you decide, that's when things start to shift. Not because the circumstances around you have changed, but because you have decided to stop waiting for them to change. You don't need your permission slip signed by anyone else. You have the authority to sign your own. If you're honest with yourself today, many of the times that you thought you were waiting on God, you were really just waiting on yourself, and God was waiting on you too, waiting for you to realize that the permission slip was in your hands and all you had to do was sign it. It's time for our Shine Method connection. For those of you who may be new to the Bold Becomers podcast, Shine Method Connection is the segment of our podcast where we get to dive into my proprietary framework, the Shine Method. Shine is an acronym. The S for seek the truth, the H for honor your story, the I for include the lessons, the N for navigate your growth, and the E for embrace and express. Today's episode, we're going to be talking about navigating your growth. When we talk about signing your own permission slip, you have to understand that navigating your growth is about activation. It's about making the decision instead of being passive and sitting by and hoping. Navigating your growth is where you stop drifting and you start steering. You start becoming intentional, understanding that every yes that you say, everything that you allow, everything that you just go along with is still a decision. And it's either moving you closer in alignment to what God has said to you, or it's causing you to be in misalignment. The truth is, you cannot navigate anything from a posture of waiting. Navigation requires that you put your hand on the wheel. And that's not to say that you're in control, but you are collaborating. The Bible tells us that faith without works is dead. And so you allowing yourself to move into a place of granting yourself permission is really you just saying that I'm ready to do what God has called me to do, and I'm no longer willing to continue to move in things that are not in alignment with that. Navigating your growth is about taking all of the work that you've done on the internal and start to move it into action. You start to actually translate that internal work into moving, decision, activity, creation, a direction, a choice that you stand on. And this is the difference between insight and movement. You can have all of the revelation in the world and still go nowhere if you don't decide to navigate forward. Navigating your growth means that you're willing to take all of the knowledge, all of the wisdom that you've gleaned from your story, from your bushel experience and your background behavior, and then you're finally willing to do something with it. You sign the permission slip and you move. Here's what waiting really looks like. Waiting looks like saying, I'm praying about it for months or years even, without ever actually praying about it as much as you're just thinking about it anxiously. Waiting looks like needing everyone else in your life to agree with your decision before you actually make the decision. Waiting looks like endlessly planning, researching, and preparing without ever executing. And then calling it diligence when it actually has become avoidance. Waiting looks like waiting to feel ready when readiness is often a feeling that shows up after a decision has been made, not before it. Waiting looks like being vocal about your frustration without ever turning that frustration into a decision. And even if you've been practicing waiting, it doesn't mean that you've been making a mistake. It doesn't mean that you're not faithful. It just means that you've usually been taught, directly or indirectly, that waiting equals trusting God, that waiting is safer than making a bad decision. That waiting is being holy and humble and a good servant. But sometimes what you've been calling waiting has actually been God waiting on you. The beauty in the work that I do is not about calling out background behavior or identifying bushel experiences. The true beauty in the work that I do is helping you to realize that the light that you want to shine has really been there all along. You just have to get to a place where you can make the decision to remove everything in your life that has been trying to dim it, that has told you to cover it, or that has been trying to extinguish your light. With that said, you have an opportunity to make a different decision. You have an opportunity to sign your own permission slip, but you have to decide whether or not you want to continue to get the results of waiting and not seeing things come to pass, waiting and watching someone else walk in their purpose, their fulfillment, and seeing the blessing and the benefits of doing that while you're stuck in idle. That was never God's intention for you. And the purpose of this episode, the purpose of every Bold Becomers podcast episode, is to get you moving forward, is to get you to say goodbye to the background behavior and the false identities that you formed while you were in background behavior so that you can reveal your light and shine the way that God intended you to. So with that said, I'm going to give you some strategies for how you can start moving forward in giving yourself permission. First, I want you to name what you've been tolerating out loud. As a bold becomer, when we do our work, identifying and naming is so powerful. It allows us to be honest about what we've been dealing with and getting specific so that we can now address it. So that's what I want you to do today. I want you to name what you've been tolerating out loud, and then I want you to write it down somewhere. Next, I want you to begin to separate awareness from agency. You have to start getting real about where you've only been aware about something versus when you've actually decided to do something about it. Because let's be real, when you've spent years, months, weeks on repeats and loops, it can feel like awareness is productivity. Awareness can feel like progress. And if you're not careful, you'll begin to believe that, hey, I'm doing something, I'm making progress, I'm getting in alignment, when you still haven't even made a decision yet. So that's why it's important for you to identify the difference between where you're just aware versus where you're actually beginning to utilize your agency. And then lastly, what I want you to do is I want you to stop outsourcing the decision. I want you to make it a practice to just allow some things to be in-house. And when I say in-house, what I mean is some things need to be just between you and God, where you have prayed about said situation, you've prayed about the action that you're supposed to take, and God has given you an inclination. Either you've heard him audibly in the spirit, or you felt a nudge in your heart that says this is what you need to do. And you need to just go ahead and move on it. Don't share the decision with someone else until after you've actually made the decision and acted on it. This is going to help you to build the muscle of signing your own permission slip, because you're not going to be looking for someone else to co-sign with you or to take ownership in the decision with you. Because at the end of the day, the person who's responsible for giving an answer for what you did or did not do is you. So if God sent you the message, if God gave you the blueprint, if God told you the vision, he's expecting for you to move in it, to step forward and to not wait for someone else's green light for you to get into activation mode. Here's our challenge of the week. Identify one specific thing that you've been aware of, emotional about, or vocal about, but you haven't decided to change yet. And then I want you to write down this sentence and then say it out loud. I am not doing this anymore. Or if you need the decision to be in the affirmative, you say, today I have decided, and then insert what you've decided. Okay? Then I want you to take one small action this week that is allowing you to prove to yourself that you meant it. You do not need anyone else's signature on this. You are signing your own permission slip. Sis, I want you to hear this clearly today. You have been waiting for so many things, the right timing, someone else's approval, a feeling of readiness that just keeps slipping further and further away the more that you wait for it. But like I shared earlier in this episode, authenticity begins with agency. And agency was never something that someone else could give you. It's been yours this entire time. God will send you the invitation. He will allow you to go through the bushel. He allowed the discomfort that you experienced so that you could come to a decision. He probably even sent it more times than you realized. But in his patience of waiting for you to make the decision that needed to be made, he was hoping that you would come to the realization that the decision has always been yours. I told you earlier about my own moment of deciding, about hearing God ask me when I was actually going to choose something different. And I want you to know that the moment that I actually decided was the moment that things actually started shifting. Not because the conditions changed first, but because I stopped waiting for them to change. And when you make a decision, you sometimes forget to realize that the decision is what helps you to form the identity. Once you make a decision that is in alignment with what God is showing you, telling you, moving you towards, right? That is when you can become the person who will fulfill, who will receive, who can embody what God has said. I'll say it again. You don't need your permission slip signed by your pastor, your spouse, your community, or your friends. You have the authority to sign it on your own. So sign it today. Whatever the decision is, stop describing it and start deciding it. And even as you step into permission today, I want to invite you to continue to go deeper in this work. Make sure that you go grab my free guide, Permission to Shine. You can go over to CharaJanaeShine.com and it's available for you to download today, because this is your time to start walking boldly in everything that God is calling you to in this season. This is the time for you to start revealing the light that God has placed inside of you. And until next time, remember to keep becoming, embrace godly authenticity, and live with shine. I'll see you in the next episode.